Okay, so we are the Hurricane Katrina group. We are group three. Um, so here we go. I am doing section one. So, what happened in for Hurricane Katrina? So, Hurricane Katrina started on August 29th, 2005. It was one of the most destructive and deadliest hurricanes in the United States. Almost 2,000 deaths. It originated in the Bahamas, actually. And then through another severe storms, the storms accumulated together, and then it worked its way up to the Gulf of Mexico, and then obviously hit the New Orleans area. So when the hurricane actually hit right away, it was only Category 3, with winds at like about 100 to 140 miles per hour. Still huge hurricane. And then the hurricane eventually grew in size to a Category 5, and winds eventually got up to about 200 miles per hour, which is crazy. Um, and the hurricane actually stretched about 400 miles across. So it didn't just affect the New Orleans area. It did hit the New Orleans area the heaviest, but it did affect places in Mississippi, along the coast in Mississippi and Alabama. But New Orleans was obviously the one that got hit the hardest. So a little bit about the response to Katrina. So the response was actually considered to be a very poor response to the hurricane. The country and the Louisiana government was actually heavily criticized by a lot of people for the lack of preparation, but they were actually criticized the most from their flood plan. The Louisiana government was criticized a lot from their flood plan, because most of the damage from the hurricane was from flooding, which actually forced a lot of people to stay in their homes. Um, and a lot of the deaths were actually from people that had to stay in their homes because they starved to death because they couldn't go anywhere for a long time. They starved to death. They had dehydration. They just didn't have enough resources to withstand the length of the flooding and the hurricane, because it took so long to get people out of their houses and back on the streets. But this did, however, spark a lot of leaders to get creative, and try to think of solutions to these huge hurricanes, and other natural disasters that put a lot of people's lives at risk. One man by the name of Michael McDaniel, he spent the last 8 years creating a rapid response emergency housing system. So it's basically, sort of like a portable housing system that's very compact and safe. It can withstand a lot, obviously, if it can withstand these hurricanes and these big storms. So last year, 8 years, he's been testing new designs and new systems to try to protect people from these big natural disasters. So people like this, many others, are devoting their lives and their studies to helping people and get through these hurricanes, which I think is super cool. So, little last thing about the hurricane. So there was actually $100 billion in damages, which is crazy, and a lot of that was actually from flooding. Most of it was from flooding. Not all of it was from just the hurricane itself. Um, so actually, the elevation at New Orleans, the average elevation is 6 feet below sea level. So the flooding was a huge problem because it was so easy for the water to come in and just sit there because it was 6 feet below sea level. So it just kind of sat there, and that's why it took so long for everybody to stay inside and eventually starve to death, like I said before, because it was just so hard to get the water out, and there was so much of it. So that was the main reason why the flooding was so bad. It was because of the sea level. And so, like I said before, their flood plan wasn't exactly the greatest. So I think New Orleans has, in the last 15 years, updated it and are ready for future problems like this. So there's section one.